The other day I did a video about ads where I said, where do ads fit into prophetic videos, right? And then in that, I learned from those who had, commented that it's in prayers and you guys are seeing it in, other areas that really should be dedicated solely to ministry. And so there were different opinions about it and everything, okay? But guys, I'm going to talk about this again. This time I'm not going to have comments on here because I don't want the war, okay? There are comments that I did not approve that were rude and disrespectful, right? And then there are those of you gave me your opinions, some agreed, some gave me a different perspective, and that's fine, okay? But to keep from having to deal with all the little rude comments and stuff, where there will be no comments because I don't have time. I think we should be able to speak and share opinions without all of that. So guys, let me talk to you again about this. And this is an example that I gave one person as well. She gave me a perspective to consider, and then I shared something with her as well. Guys, when it comes to ministry, we're dealing with souls. And this is one of the things that I believe, there's certain things that I believe those who are in ministry, they believe and they think it's not a big deal. But when we are in ministry, we are dealing with hurting people. We're dealing with people who are at the brink of homicidal thoughts, suicidal thoughts, deep depression, deep anxiety, abusive relationships. Some people have gotten out of relationships where they were being physically, sexually, emotionally abused. They have been tortured. You cannot begin to imagine what people are going through in their lives. And the thing about YouTube and Periscope and Facebook is that it goes all over the world. The only exceptions will be countries where they are not allowed to have internet, which it may be a few places like North Korea and such, right? So in many of these countries and other countries like, where communism is basically at the head, there are limitations. But outside of that, guys, there are billions of people on this planet, and there are lots of souls that are out there, people that are hurting. When I walk into a store and I see someone that looks perfectly fine and the Lord lays it in my heart to speak to that person, and this person can break down in the grocery aisle and begin to just pour out to me and tell me what's going on, they're hurting. When I see someone, a young man that looks perfectly fine, and the Lord tells me to go up and speak think to this person, and this young man willingly lets me hug him, then guys, there are people that are hurting. One thing that I made as an example was because I was in the medical field. Okay, I was in the military, I served in the medical field. And I'm here to tell you about one of the most serious surgeries you can ever have would be when you're working on any part of the human body. But we're going to talk about heart surgery. Now, inside that room, only the required staff will be in that room. There's not going to be a bunch of disruption. There's not going to be a bunch of in and out. And they have more than one surgeons that are working on this one patient. The focus is the patient. Okay, so in that room, they're going to have the circulators. They're going to have those that are scrubbed in for the instrumentation, those that are set specifically to get everything ready for the doctors, the surgeons, everything. Those who are going to be doing the anesthesia, those who are going to be there to bring in the equipment that's needed to distributing the equipment, even the equipment itself, it's covered with sterile coverings. Nothing is taken for granted as the whole room is focused on this one patient, and there's nothing that's taken for granted. There are all types of things that are in preparation. There's no one that's just assumed that everything will just go fine. That's what we want, and that's what the focus is. So everyone from the scrub, those who are scrubbed in at the instrument table, the back table, it's covered with sterile covering. Everything is centered on that patient on the table because it's a matter of life and death. So whether it's the OR nurse, whether it's the circulators, whether it's the anesthesia guys, everybody in that room, this focus is this patient, and nothing is taken for granted. What's going on is that people think they're not thinking on the flip side. When you're adding a bunch of ads in there, what's going on in someone's mind? What's going on with that soul? You think it's not a big deal. It's just a few seconds. Oh, it shouldn't be that big deal. But see, that's the point. That's why I'm telling you, some people should not be in ministry, because you're thinking about yourself. You would rather think of it's no big deal to put an ad in than how would it affect someone? I gave an example to say, imagine someone who's depressed, someone who's on the brink, they're thinking about taking their life and they are desperate for anything. Your video comes along and you have a word, you have a prayer, you have something that is reaching into this person, and they're desperate. And as they are crying and they're weeping and they're listening to you and they're considering turning their lives to the Lord, suddenly an ad pops up. And you have no control of the nature of the ads. There are all types of ads on YouTube. Okay? Ads, I'm trying to tell you, because I've been on the receiving end watching stuff and it's so good. And there's this one channel that I love, man, and I love to watch the videos. It's so uplifting. But boom, an ad will pop up and it just kind of it throws you off for a second, like, oh, and then you got to wait for at least a few seconds, and then you click it, then you get back in, and it's like, wow, this is so good. Yes, this is awesome. Boop, here comes another ad. So guys, this is just me listening and going, okay, that may not be a big deal, but what about that person that is thinking about hurting themselves or hurting someone else? One thing about being in the medical field is we take nothing for granted. Nothing is taken for granted. There's certain things you just cannot afford to happen to that patient. You cannot afford to happen to that person that's been brought in. And so we're not going to just assume that, they'll be okay. We're not going to assume that they're not going to need a tourniquet if needed. They're not going to need a compression. They're probably not going to need to have a blood transfusion. They're probably not going to need that. We make no assumptions about the patient. And it's the same thing in the operating room. When they're doing heart surgery or any surgery, anything that you need to open up, you need to put any human under general anesthesia and open them up. It's serious. But heart surgery, I like to talk about that. Nothing is taken for granted. Even in the setting of the room, the sterility of the room is not taken for granted. The availability of every bit of instrument there is not taken for granted. The scheduling of the staff that's in the room it's not taken for granted. And even if someone needs to break scrub because they need to rotate, that's not taken for granted. It is scheduled. And then when there is going to be any sort of exchange where someone is going to scrub in, they enter into that room quietly. They get into their scrubs, and they get into those sterile gowns and things quietly. There's someone who is assigned that will help them get into that, and they exchange. It is a it is a clean, warm exchange where there's no interruptions, guys. It's a matter of life and death. So you're not going to tell me, and no one's going to tell me, any justifications for ads. And I'm seeing where ads are saturated. Prophecies are saturated. I'm talking about, if you look in, you see about almost 30 of those little yellow dots in their videos. And some of them don't give you the option to skip. You're going to watch it. We're dealing with souls that are in the balance. And there's no amount of change and stuff that you could collect that justifies that. Guys, YouTube allows you to open other channels. Open another channel that's just for you to talk and chit chat. Because then you can do that and you can put all the ads you want in there. But when it comes to ministry, guys, my standard is simply that we can't afford to have those, not even a few seconds. Because if you all remember those dark places you came from, that desperation you had for Christ when you were in them dark places, every second counts, guys, because people are dying by the seconds. If you do a study on how often people are killing themselves and how often people are being murdered and how often a child is being raped and abused, then you'll see that second you stick those videos in, see, because there's a mindset. There is a mindset. And there is, to me, a lack of respect for the things of God. Especially prophecy. You're saying this came from God? And there's all this talking that you are interjecting between a word that came from God. I don't believe that's a word from God. If God has spoken to you, then there needs to be reverence. But what's happening, people are bringing the Lord down to patio level. It's no big deal. Why don't you start another channel that's for entertainment, or it could be a vlog. It's just something you're talking about. Why? Because why you have so many subs? See, people don't want to start from there. You can say, hey, I have another channel over here. It's based on cooking and just, chit chat, advice line. Oh, yeah, you can throw ads into that. But in fact, the reason why you have that many subs is because people want God. And you don't get to stick yourself and get to stick greed into it, because that's what it is. Especially when you have a bunch of ads in your videos. It is wrong. It is wrong because you are making assumptions about who will come on your channel, and you're going to justify your ad by saying, all I have is one or two, it don't matter. But how do you know that person have time to even hear what you have to say? You're making assumptions about the condition of the soul. And overall, it don't matter what the condition of the soul is, because you want to get some money. One thing I know is that God will provide. And when he provides, there's no reason why I need to compromise his word. I won't need to compromise my prayers. There needs to be no interruption for me to get, 13 cents from an ad. Guys, it's time for us to reevaluate ourselves as believers. Some of y'all may think it's no big deal. Okay. This is really what I'm going to talk about today, guys. This is what I want to throw out there. I have the opportunity to monetize my channel. I have the opportunity to, I believe as I get more people, and I think now I can add ads, because as soon as I hit 1,000, I was getting emails, okay, where they can help you build your subs and do this. But the Lord told me, don't do any of those things. He told me not to monetize his channel. And I'm not interested in doing that, okay? There are already enough people that's paying, and people are monetizing, and they're doing these things. And the Lord is saying it's leaving an impression on the world. If you want more of God, join my group. If you want to hear from God, pay me. And then now here's prayer, and here are prophetic words, and here are uh, prayer, prophecies, and all these things, exhortation, that are filled up with a bunch of ads. So there's a sense of, you know what, this is not that sacred, is it? It's time for people to just really, really get their priorities straight. Ministry, ministry, ministry. You're dealing with souls. And you can take nothing for granted, to include sticking ads in exhortation, word, prayer, and prophecy.